الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Last week we talked about the clash of civilization, the theory which was propounded by Huntington and as an extension of Fukuyama's the understanding of the end of history or the end of war. Inshallah, in this discussion, I'll be talking about most of the accusations which they have leveled against Islam and Islamic civilization, and also try to analyze that some of those fears are not genuine at all. Those fears are not based upon religiosity, religious ideology, but these are the genuine problems based upon ethnicity, geopolitics, the financial resources competition, or the territorial conflicts. They are not something which is connected with religious ideology or something which is connected with any kind of faith tradition. And inshallah, in the coming session, I'll be talking about the dialogue of civilization instead of clash of civilization. So this way, we would have completed a series of 3 lectures. First, I talked about what is this concept or theory of clash of civilization, and today I'll go to specific Islamic issues, and then the next one I'll come and talk about the dialogue between various civilizations. If you just remember what I said last time, I quoted Samuel Huntington, his book The Clash of Civilization, and I will just quote one paragraph from what he said, and that will portray most of what I summarized last week. He says that in Eurasia, the great historic fault lines between civilizations are once more aflame. This is particularly true along the boundaries of the crescent-shaped Islamic bloc of nations, from the bulge of Africa to Central Asia. Violence also occurs between Muslims on the one hand and Orthodox Serbs in the Balkans, Jews in Israel, Hindus in India, Buddhists in Burma, and Catholics in the Philippines. Islam has bloody borders. The neocons, they are analyzing the word conflicts, and they say, look at any political conflict, any geographical conflict, and you will see somehow Muslims involved in that. In Israel, the Palestinians are Muslims. In Kashmir, the Kashmiris are fighting against India, Muslims. In Philippines, they are Muslims fighting against Christian Philippines. In Iraq, in Afghanistan, Muslims fighting the superpower of their time, which is United States of America. In Chechnya, it's the Muslim fighting the Russian Orthodox. So they say wherever you go, and even they will give the example of China, that even though China and Pakistan are very close, and China is very close to the Muslim world, but then in the province, there in the eastern province, Muslims are pitched against the Chinese government. So what they say, that you can look anywhere in the world and you will see that somehow each conflict involves some Muslims. That's where they say that the problem is not individuals or the communities. There is some problem within Islam, that Islam breeds violence. And that's what they have said it, and I analyzed it last week, that they see the root of this violence in the Quran, in the history of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and as William Garthrop said it, and I quoted it last week, that the mindset which is created by the Quran itself and which is modeled by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the mindset of violence, is the mindset of terrorism. With all honesty, if you analyze the history, you will see that East and West or have the problem all along the history. throughout the history, there has been problem between the East and the West. These problems or conflicts took place before existence of Islam. When the Romans, they came and they occupied Turkey, occupied present-day Syria, occupied Egypt, and then Alexander came all the way to the Sindh or the South Asia. There was no Islam involved. The problem is that in the Western Hemisphere, the weather is cold, the land is mountainous, it's not flat. 6 to 9 months of the year, the winter, the snow, and most of the other, or you can say, weather-related impediments do not allow much of cultivation or fertilization. And in the East, you have got flat, fertile lands, and the basic necessities or the resources which are needed to control the world or to supply the metropole, the cities, or control the routes which are connected with the economic resources. These are the things which are the basis of these conflicts. That's where, even before Islam came into existence, these problems were there. And if you look, even before Islam, in the West there is Christianity. In the East there is Christianity. If you look back into the history of Christianity, from Rome, the Catholic Church is controlling the Western world. From Constantinople, the Eastern Orthodox Church is controlling most of what we call Syria, Turkey, Egypt, Ethiopia, the present-day Saudi Arabia, you just name it. Everything was Eastern Orthodox. Now, Rome and Constantinople, the Western Catholic Church and Eastern Orthodox Church, they never got along with each other. They will accuse each other and they will call each other heretical. So there were always fights between the Western Church and the Eastern Church. So even before the advent of Islam, this problem of Eastern mentality and Western mentality, or the conflict of agendas, or you can call it the conflict of policies or understanding, that has led to so many horrible stories of murder, massacres, and destruction. Then after Islam, yes, somehow Islam united many of those people who were disunited. Islam, they gave them a special concept of ummah, gave them one Quran, one concept of the Prophet, one God, and that gave them the type of unity which was not available to them before that. But even at the advent of Islam, if you look into the history, there were two main superpowers. One was the Byzantine Empire, and second was the Persian Empire. Now they were at a constant war with each other. The Byzantine will come attack, sometime take over Jerusalem, come all the way to Syria sometime, knock at the doors of Persian Empire, and then the Persians will go back, fight, and how many times they have knocked at the doors of Athens, which is Greek, say for example, or the symbol of Greco-Roman civilization. They were Christians, and the Persians were what? Sabians or Zoroastrians. So are we going to say that before Islam, then the problem was Zoroastrianism? No. You will look at it and you will see the details that it is connected with financial resources, political hegemony, it is territorial conflicts, it is ethnic conflicts, nationalistic ethos. So somehow religion is used as a potent symbol to galvanize the support of everybody. It is not the major source or the fundamental source of conflict. Whenever people have got some hidden agendas, they want to have a higher slogan, so that they can galvanize more support from everybody, and religion is that kind of potent symbol. Because everybody will agree if you say your religion or your religious identity or your faith is at stake. Everybody is going to come and say, let's what? Defend it. And especially if the attacker, if the occupier is a person from a tradition other than your tradition, and especially if there are traditional rivalries there, then you can use it as a slogan to find much support from the masses. Now, let's talk about Islam itself. Since the advent of Islam, yes, Muslims, they united whatever we call the East, and they kind of have a little excursion in Europe when they went and occupied Spain. From there, a little excursion in France and in Italy, but they did not go to the heart of Europe. So what happens is that the Eastern powers most of the time have restrained themselves within what they call East. They have not crossed the Atlantic Ocean, or they have not crossed the Mediterranean Ocean to go to the Northern Ocean, to go to England, say for example France, or the rest of the Western or Eastern European countries. After Islam, let's come back to the history after Islam. You know, the Crusaders, they are the one who came all the way to the heart of East, to the heart of Muslim land. They came, crossed over Turkey. Some of them came through Libya, Aljazair, and some of them came through the sea. And all of us, we know that they stayed in the Muslim heartland for almost a century. It was not Muslims who went to Europe or to the West to occupy. It was the Crusaders who came. And what did they do? Did they say that because of the internal problems in Europe, we need to find a bigger enemy? No, they did not say. Did they say that we are suffering from financial resources? We cannot maintain our little states or nationalistic agendas. We need to find some extra resources so that we can maintain our lifestyle. No, they did not say. They used the religious symbol that the land where Jesus was born and was crucified is under the occupation of what? The Antichrist, the Muslims. So that's where the Normans, the French, and the English knights, all of them got together. But with all honesty, did they fulfill the message of Jesus? Did they bring the peace to the Middle East? Or did they bring the love and compassion of Jesus to that area? No. They massacred 75,000 Muslims whom they have given the shelter in the masjid or in Haram al-Sharif, which is Masjid al-Aqsa. And when they ruled with iron hand. But the whole intention was to get the fertile land, to get the resources, and take it back to the West. So Muslim East or Muslim, I would say, warriors did not go to Europe or to West to occupy them. The Crusaders came, and they are the one who took the military excursion into the heart of Muslim land. After that, the only thing Muslims did is to repossess the Holy Land. They just expelled them from their lands which were occupied by the Crusaders. After that, what happens? The colonials, the Spaniard, the Portuguese, the English, the French, what slogan did they use? They used the same slogan that these are, astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah, the others, the Muslims who are inferior. We have got the message of Jesus. We need to take the Christian values to these uneducated, unsophisticated, uncivilized Muslims. So first came the merchants, the business people, East India Company. Then came some fleets to support them. Then came the Western guns to occupy these lands. Yes, missionaries, they came. The churches, they came. But they worked as the intelligence agents to gather the intelligence for the Western armies to come and attack. And what was the agenda? The agenda was, number one, to control the lands, especially the sugar land, because at that time, sugar was the highest industry. That's where they came to Caribbean. That's where they came to United States of America, because these were lands, and at that time, slavery and sugar was what? The industry of that time. So they took the raw material, took it back home, converted it into textile, converted it into different industries, and sold the same thing to the colonial post with a lot more money. And this is the way they stole the resources, the raw material, and they also stole the wealth of the people. Now, their slogan was religious. We are there to provide them with justice, with the love of Jesus. But all of us, we know what type of love and compassion they have distributed to the colonial outpost, and what type of message of Jesus have they given to the people. Now everybody knows it. Muslims did not go. It's the Christian West who is colonizing the Muslim world, stealing their resources and exploiting them and using their markets to become rich. Now, it did not last very long. As you know, the last Muslim country was occupied in 1924, which is Turkey. The caliphate was demolished in 1924 by the Kemal Atatürk on behest of the West. And by that time, most of the Muslim countries were occupied, all of us we know. But it did not take Muslims more than 24 years or 25 years to figure out what's going on. They were without weapons, they were without resources. Most of their resources were sucked by these colonial powers. But with the name of Quran, in the name of Rasulullah Sallam, in the concept of Ummah, they stood up, they fought back. And the first Muslim country which received freedom from the colonial power was in 1946, then 1947. And then all of that, Algeria, Morocco, you just name it. There's one thing which history will prove to the world, that this civilizational aspect in the Muslim world, which somehow works like a glue, brings them together, gives them one united front, gives them this mission that somehow we have lost our path and we need to get back to our path. And somehow the resistance based upon justice and equality, or fighting against occupation or an invader, has been proven very much successful among the Muslims, a lot more successful than its success in Latin America or in Africa or in some of the other faith traditions. They do not mind giving as many sacrifices as possible, because this concept that if you cannot live a respectable, honorable life, then living a life of humiliation is not worth. And this concept that if you are not given the proper respect and honor in this life, and you die for your own rights and for justice, for equality, then the next life is going to be the better life, the life of Shahada. This concept, nobody can deny, has really worked miracles when it comes to the issue of occupation and the resistance to invaders and occupation. That's what happened during the Crusaders' time. This is what happened during the colonial powers. Now, if you look also what happened after the colonial powers, divide and rule, redrawing of these borders, They were so arbitrary redrawing. Divide one ethnic group into three different portions. Just take the example, Kurds. Now, Kurds are one ethnicity. They speak the same language. They have got the same culture. But when the colonial powers, they want to leave, they don't want to give Kurds their own nation, their own ethnicity, their own group. They divided them between Turkey, Iraq, Syria, and Iran. They are ethnically united, but border-wise they are separated. Now, to see their cousins, to see their uncles, they have to take the visa. Divide and rule. Look at what they did in India. Now, Kashmiris are, most of them are Muslims. Divide them between occupied Kashmir and free Kashmir. Look at the Sikh, the Punjabi. Half of them are in India, half of them in Pakistan. Look at the Pashtuns. Half of them in Pakistan and half of them there in Afghanistan. Look at the Balochis. Half of them in Pakistan, half of them in Iran, Hazara. So what happens? Redrawing of these borders on arbitrary border lines was meant to destroy these ethnicities and to keep on making them depend upon their colonial masters. Again, what happens? The people who were left, they were the puppets who do not have much to do with their own people. These are the people who were not popular among their own groups. They are not respected among their own groups. They are supported by the colonial masters, and the colonial masters are ruling this part based upon what? Dealing directly with these puppets. Now, Muslims, Muslim countries, Muslim population, Muslim ethnicities, they are reflecting upon the history. They say, we did not go to their heartland, they came to us in crusaders. They are the one who controlled us through colonial powers, and now these colonial puppets are usurping our rights and taking our resources, giving it to the West, whether oil or chemicals or minerals. These families are benefiting while the entire population is of no use. Resentment, distrust of the West, misperception, you can call it, about the West. Lot of misgiving that these people are not there to help you, to support you. They are there to exploit you, take your resources, divide you, make you fight between yourself, and then leave. And they've got the historical background. Don't blame Islam for all of these reasons. There are historical reasons for these things. Now, there are some choking points upon the world which are essential for any superpower to control, to maintain its superiority or to maintain its supply of resources. And these choke points, most of them are in the Muslim world. Take the example right now. Nowadays, oil is the base of most of the energy-based transportation technology, you name it. If there's not enough supply of oil and gas, the aircraft, the tanks, the missiles, none of them will work. So anybody who controls the resources of the oil and gas is going to be having the military superiority or the technical superiority. If you do not control those choke points, then you are in trouble. What are some of those choke points? I will give you the example. The Persian Gulf. The Persian Gulf, if you know it, because this is the Indian Ocean, which is connected with the Arab Ocean, Bahirat al-Arab. And all of us, we know in Gwadar, in Karachi, in Dubai, in Makran, so if you look at it, this is Dubai and Amman, this is what is Gwadar. And in between, Bandar Abbas, the Iran, you know it, So it is just like a finger. It goes inside all the way to Basra, Kuwait, Iraq. And if you have to get the oil from there, you cannot afford not to have the control upon the Persian Gulf. Now that oil comes from there to Bahirat al-Arab. Yemen comes all along. Oman and Yemen comes all along it. Then it turns into Red Ocean, Red Sea. Bahira Ahmar, which goes through Saudi Arabia, Jeddah. On other side is what? Somalia, Ethiopia. Then you've got Egypt, say for example. Then you've got the Suez Canal, because that Suez Canal brings everything together. This is the route which has been the route connecting the East with the West. Because West has got 2 land routes and the others are ocean routes. The land routes, 2 possible land routes are Jabal Tariq, which is connected with Spain. You cross it and you come to Morocco, Aljazair, and from Africa you come to East. The other point is in Istanbul, Turkey. As you know, when you go to Istanbul, the Bosphorus is the one which is dividing the Europe from the Asia. Europe from Asia. So you cross Bosphorus, which is 16 miles, then you are in East or you are in the West. So these are the 2 lands. And both of them are what? Part of the Muslim world. Turkey has been Muslim, and Marrakesh and Aljazair has been Muslim. So the land routes from the west to east, they cross the Muslim world. Now when it comes to the naval routes or the ocean routes, the ocean route between east and west is what? The closest, or you can say that the shortest is the Mediterranean Sea, because Mediterranean Sea goes from what we call Israel, Egypt, Beirut, and after that Cyprus, Greek, and then you start the Italy, France, you just name it. So anybody who controls these 3 choking points is going to be able to control the business, the resources, and the geopolitics. Muslim countries happen to be in the middle of the whole world. And if you look into the crescent type, the way it goes like that, starting from Morocco, look at African, coming to Libya, coming to Sudan, coming to Egypt, from there to Saudi Arabia, you just name it, Persia, going all the way to Central Asia, South Asia, then Indonesia, Malaysia, Brunei, Fiji. So what happens is it is in the middle of the world, and it is so long that from the north to the south, from the east to the west. So the world cannot deal with each other except by means of dealing with the Muslim world. These countries or these nations, they were divided on ethnic lines. But since Islam came, they are still divided on ethnic lines, but it gave them one united front. La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah. One Quran, one Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Where they differ on even the foreign policy, where the Iranians will not sit with many of the Arabs, for example. There's always problem. Like even nowadays, Saudi foreign policy is very different than Iranian foreign policy. Even when the Pashtuns are very different from Hazara, when the Arabs could be very different from the non-Arabs, when the South Asians are more related in culture with the Hindus than you can call it with Arabs. But when it comes to the issue of Palestine or Saudi Arabia or Islamic issues, this is one ummah. As Iqbal said it, Neel ke sahil se leke ta bakha ke Kashgar. Whether it is Neel or it's the end of China, this is one ummah. This is what? One ummah. This is the biggest problem in the minds of many of the Westerns, that they have dealt with the world. They have been able to divide and rule them. But unfortunately, as many times they have divided the Muslim world, there's always some group, some people who stand up, talk about pan-Arabism, pan-Islamism, ummah unity, and people from all over the world somehow agree with them. So even though they have done whatever they could, from re-establishing the borders, dividing the ethnicities, putting their puppets over there, but somehow they are not having that easy access to the Muslim world and making them pro-Western the way they want it, as they have been able to do it in Germany, in Japan, and in Latin America. I mean, sometimes if you look into the slogans, why we want the Muslim world to change? Because there are terrorist violence. Why we want the Muslim world to change? Because we want democracy. Or they are against modernity. Why we want the Muslim world to change? Because they are not free market. Look at all of these slogans. And with all honesty, if you analyze all of those slogans, you will see that somehow those slogans are not genuine at all. Let's talk about democracy. Oh, we want to give them the democratic system, the gift of what? Liberal democracy. Okay. So that's the reason you went to Iraq, to occupy Iraq, because you wanted to give them liberal democracy. Okay, fine. What about Saudi Arabia? What about Jordan? What about Kuwait? How could you want to give democratic system to one country and you don't want to do the same thing in the neighboring country, because the other neighboring countries are giving you what you are looking for? So over there, royalty, one family, and what control of resources is fine. But Iraq and Afghanistan was the problem. We want to give them democracy. Oh, they are not secular. What the heck happened that you went and killed Saddam Hussein? He was your cousin, secular. He killed more Muslims than anybody else. My question is, what do you mean? He was a nationalistic leader? He was against religiosity? He curbed religious freedom? He killed Muslims? He was involved in Iraq and in an Iran fight for 11 years. How could you find a better secular than Saddam Hussein? Okay, fine. If he is not secular and we wanted to get rid of him, what about Saudi Arabia? Even the female cannot drive there. What are you talking about secularism? Even female are given the right by King Abdullah right now, which is given as a gift in 2015, that in 2015 they will be able to what? Vote. So what are we talking about? Am I clear? Democracy. Fine. You want democracy. Iran is perhaps the most democratic country among the Muslim world, because the system of voting has been there. People have been elected, and somehow that system has worked. In Jordan, elections take place, and the king comes and nullifies the parliament. New parliament comes. Same thing happens in Kuwait. Elections are there, but the king says, fine, no more, come with the new elections. In Egypt, as you know, what happened in Turkey, when Najmuddin Erbakan was elected, as you know, 2 times, the army came and nullified. I mean, we did not support Hamas. Hamas came through the democratic system. I mean, you may differ with Hamas ideology, but you cannot differ that, yes, they used the democratic system to reach to power. But we did not accept that democracy, but we want democracy in Afghanistan and in Iraq. Let's talk about dictatorship. Okay, we want Muslim world to change because of what? dictatorship. But remember, in Europe, most of you know Spain. Till 1970s, Spain was what? Nothing but a dictatorship. Such a dictator that, astaghfirullah, not much of the freedom were allowed there in Europe. Greek, till recently, just 10 years ago, they changed a little bit, but before that, the Greek Orthodox Church was controlling the government, and they would not allow any Western influence over there. Actually, if you remember that the Greek terrorists, who were called terrorists, were killing the American citizens and American diplomats in Athens. Am I clear? What happens even nowadays, that difficulty, because they are Greek Orthodox and the West is, either Anglican or Protestant or the Catholic Church, you keep on hearing, oh, Greek is going to be bankrupt pretty soon. We are bailing them out. I'm sure you must have heard, because internally there's problems. So let's talk about Latin America. Fidel Castro is sitting on the other side of America, and don't you think it's dictator? Shouldn't we take care of that before we go to Saudi Arabia or Kuwait or take care of those dictators? What about all of these dictators in Latin America who have been ruling and were ruling with the blessings of the United States of America and with the blessing of the Catholic Church? Am I clear? Latin America was complete dictators. But then, when we divided them, they accepted us one by one. Now, those people are under our blessing, under our nose, following us. So there's no problem of what? Democracy or dictatorship or any problem, because they have accepted our financial and military hegemony. But our eyes are, oh, there are dictatorship in the Middle East. But what's going on? Iran is a democratic country. Our relationship should be better than any of the other regimes. But what I'm talking about is that our principles are double standards. They are not meant, for the slogans which we are raising. And that's the reason that after trying all of these slogans, many of the people in the Muslim world, they have got mistrust. They feel that all of these are beautiful slogans, but behind those slogans, there are hidden agendas of exploitation, control, military hegemony, and financial resources. That's where this mistrust is translated into violence, into resistance, and somehow our policymakers are not willing to look at the essence or the whys of those problems. They want to lump it or dump it upon Islam. But they do not know, and I think they know it, but somehow they want to find a broader enemy, that Islam is not the problem. The problem is our hegemonizing policies. People's mistrust of America and American policymakers, and East mistrust of West, because history has proven that most of the time the Western hegemonizing powers have gone to the East, sucked their resources, controlled them, and established their colonies, especially on the those choking points, and that's where those people, they resent them. It's not Islam. Whether do the Hindus like Western powers? Do the Chinese like Western powers? Do the Buddhists like Western powers? When colonials were controlling India, do you think that the Hindus were sitting, mashallah, peaceful, not fighting against the British enemy? Gandhi and Nehru was perhaps more active than even Quaid-e-Azam when it comes to fighting what? The colonial powers. The Hindus fought. So are you going to say now the Hindus are the source of violence? Chinese Confucianists, the Confucian people and Buddhists of China, They fought against the colonial powers. The Vietnamese, they are not Muslims. They are what? They are Buddhist, and they fought against America. Am I clear what I'm trying to say? Now these Tibetan, they are fighting against China. Are they Muslims? They are what? Buddhist, or you just name it. Those kamikazes, or whatever you call it, like, when you bring the aircraft and you commit the suicide by what? Dropping it in the fleet. They were not Muslim. They were committing suicide, those kamikazes. Look at what's happening between Sri Lankan Hindus, who are Tamil tigers, and they are fighting against Sinhalese in Sri Lanka. And wallah, if you do the statistics, the greatest number of suicide bombings have been done by Tamil tigers. They are the one who invented suicide bombing. They are the one who used the suicide for West first. I mean, look, Rajiv Gandhi was killed by what? By that suicide bombing. The greatest number of suicide bombing are committed by Tamil tigers. But nobody is blaming them, or that Hinduism is responsible. But Islam is the source of suicide bombing. Islam is the source of car bombing. Islam is the source of terrorism. Am I clear what I'm trying to say? Now, everybody talks about Buddhism or Sikhism. But do you know, Indira Gandhi was killed by whom? By the Sikh. It was the Sikh group who came from India and settled in Canada. They brought the Air India flight on the Atlantic Ocean down. You know what happened to the Air India flight? That was brought down by the Sikh terrorist or extremist. Nobody has blamed Sikhism for violence, or it is the violent religion, but somehow Islam seems to be the source of all violence in the world. And Islam seems to be breeding violence because somehow the Western hegemonizing powers have been able to break down almost every religious tradition, secularize almost every faith tradition, because of some inherent weaknesses within those traditions. But somehow they have not been able to do it to the Quran. Quran is still intact. They have not been able to do it to the model of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because that model is so comprehensive and it is so sincere, I would say, such a pure character, that the believers who study him cannot find the loopholes and the defects which others are trying to put into him. So therefore they sincerely believe in that model. And at the same time, this concept of justice and resistance, or jihad you can call it, that whenever your land is occupied, whenever your rights are taken, you stand up and you resist. So this ideology of resistance is not present in most of the other traditions, or somehow they have been what? Secularized. And we have discussed it, why majority of the people don't take Bible as the word of God. We have studied it, because there are some internal factors. Why many of the people are no more interested in the concept of God in Christianity? Because of Trinity and so many intricacies which people are unable to understand. Why many of the other people are not so much religious? Because some of the religious laws do not make much sense to them. Because of what? Human addition to those books and those concepts. Somehow those concepts are saved and are still intact in Islam. So Muslim believes in them because from inside they are convinced. And somehow the Western powers are not able to what? Dissect them or to secularize them as they have done it with the other faith traditions. So that's where Islam becomes the enemy number one. Am I clear? But there's a book which Graham Fuller has written. The name of the book is The World Without Islam. And today's lecture, most of what I'm going to share with you, or I've shared with you, is kind of analysis of Graham Fuller. Graham Fuller was the vice chairman of I would say, National Intelligence Council at CIA, NIC. And that council is responsible to provide the policymaker with long-term strategies how to protect America or make the policies which are going to be suitable for American interest in the world. Nowadays, he is teaching in the University of Vancouver. He's a professor of history there. I mean, you can imagine this person knows Iran, Turkey, most of the Middle East inside out, because he has been a diplomat, he has lived there, he has studied, and he has done the analysis. And vice chairman of NIC in CIA is a very responsible position, you can imagine. This person is writing this book based upon his experience. And he asked this question in that book. Suppose, if we take Islam out of equation, suppose if Islam never existed, would the so-called Muslim world of today or Middle East will be peaceful? Would there be no resentment against America or the West? Would Christianity prevail over those countries? Would there be no 9/11? And the answer he comes up with after all of these analyses, he says, even if Islam never existed, there was no Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, no Quran whatsoever, even then the world today will be exactly the same as it is right now. Because these conflicts are not based upon Islam, religious ideology, they are based upon ethnic problems, resources problems, territorial conflicts, and the problem of authority and hegemony. And the summary, what he gives in a very civilized fashion is that nobody likes to be invaded, nobody likes to be occupied, nobody likes to be exploited, and nobody likes to be colonialized. And the problem he sees is that West has got this sense of superiority. They think that they are there to educate the whole world, and somehow their values are the best values for everybody. And in the name of those values, there are certain hidden agendas. And those hidden agendas are controlling the world, controlling the resources of the world, and basically using it to our own benefits without sharing much to the people to whom these resources belong. And as bigger is going to be the hegemonial policy or the agenda, there's going to be more resentment. So his analysis is, it's not because of Islam, it's because we the Americans, we are the superpower, we have got the military might, and we have got over 180 all over the world. So people resent us because they think we are trying to be their masters, we are trying to be the police, and nobody likes the masters or the police. And nobody likes to be dictated. And he gives a lot of examples. I mean, this is a very interesting book, which I'm sure I have suggested to so many people. And even the students are reading it. I think most of you should read it. Graham Fuller, The World Without Islam. What he says that most of the accusations now or allegations are placed upon Islam. That if today Islam ceased to exist, there will be no terrorism, there will be no holy war, there will be no fatwas, there will be no jihad, there will be no car bombing, suicide bombing. But he asked the questions, what happened before Islam? Why were there massacres before Islam? And why they continued after Islam, not in the Islamic world, but outside the Islamic world? He asked the same question. Did the Crusaders kill more people than the Muslims killed? Didn't the Crusaders destroy the Eastern Orthodox Kaaba in Constantinople in 1204? when the Crusaders came, they first killed the Jews in Germany. Then they killed even the Pope of the Eastern Orthodox Church, which are Christians. The only difference between the Western Church and the Eastern Church is perhaps they did not believe that Mary is the mother of God. They felt she is just like a female. Or they did not give their allegiance to the Western Pope. But why the Christians killed Christians before they came to the Holy Land? These are the believers who believe in Jesus. These are the believers who love Jesus, who accept the Bible as the Word of God. You were supposed to go to Holy Land and free it from the Muslims, the Antichrist. And why you are killing the Christ or the Christians? Am I clear? And he asked the question, he said, suppose if all of the people in the Middle East were Christians nowadays, there are no Muslims, what will happen? He says, exactly what happened before Islam. The Byzantine Empire was divided into two, Eastern and Western. The brothers, they brought Christianity to get the political power and authority. One time they would say Jesus is God, and then they feel that majority of the people do not believe in that one, so they will say Jesus is not God. The Arian controversy. To get two brothers coming from the same father, but coming with different theological ideology. Now, they say that when the West tried to occupy the Eastern Nestorians, they resisted. They were Christians. They fought. And then he says, Pope, the Western Pope, for almost 800 years never entered East because he was resented to the extent that nobody was willing to accept him or to welcome him. When Pope John Paul came to Turkey and Syria and Palestine, it was after 800 years. He says, even if there's no Muslim in the Middle East, do you expect the Persians and the Turks to welcome the Western imperial powers and say, thank you very much, come and invade us and occupy us? And he says, this whole concept of one universal civilization is baloney. Within one civilization, you have got these ethnic groups. Persians, Iranians are Muslims. Arabs are Muslims. South Asians are Muslims. But look, the difference of opinion among them. Shia, Sunni. Even Deobandi Brelvi, Ahli Hadith. To claim that there's one monolithic civilization is a baloney. There are 52 countries and each country has got different foreign policy. And within the same areas, he says, even if there was no Islam, there would still be Persians, Arabs, Jews, Berbers, Pashtun, you just name it. And these people, they've got different ethnicities and they are fighting to control the territories, the resources. So these things have taken place between Muslims, when Muslims fought with each other, the Mughals against such and such, the Abbasid against Umayyad. Same thing happened within Christianity. Same thing happened between the Chinese kings, Mongols. So what he says he says, don't blame religion. These are geopolitical realities. They will happen if Islam is there, and they will happen if Islam is not there. And he also says, he says, look into the history. Didn't the Hindu fight the West when the West tried to occupy India? Didn't the Chinese fought against British? Didn't the Vietnamese, they fought against America? He says, how you come up with this idea that everybody is supposed to welcome us and to accept us as the superior? Nobody likes anybody to invade their country. And everybody feels that we have got the right to govern ourselves. Our culture is equal to other people's culture. He said, stop this understanding that the whole world should accept our hegemony because we are the most civilized people. No. People, they believe themselves as independent. They believe themselves that they are equal, and God has created them equal. So stop this concept of hegemony, and perhaps there will be peace in the world even without Islam. But if you don't stop that one, then don't blame Islam. He also talks about the Palestinian issue. People say Muslims are never going to coexist with the Jews. Because of what? Palestinian problem. Fuller says, he says, suppose if there was no Islam, do you think that the fight between Palestinian and the Jews will stop? He says no. Those Palestinians have lived there for 13 centuries. You are the one who have done injustice to the Jewish community for a millennium. Because Jews have safe havens among the Muslims. They lived, they prospered, and they had security in the Muslim world, while Christendom mistreated them for almost a millennium. Then the hatred reached to the level that Holocaust took place. 5-6 million were what? Put into those, astaghfirullah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not even a human being can think of putting the animals into those kind of firehouses as the Germans, the Nazis, or the Europeans did to the Jewish people in Germany. He says, now you felt guilty. You should have given them Germany, because Germany was the source of this problem. If you didn't like them to be having a state in Germany, what about Poland? They wanted it, it was close by. Why you have to just push them to go to Palestine? Now, when the Jews have gone to Palestine, they kicked 750,000 original inhabitants of that land out. They committed terrorism against the British power. The guerrillas, he says that the first terrorist guerrillas were created by the Zionist group, the Jews in Israel, first against the British colonial power, and then against the Ottomans and the Palestinians. Whatever you do, if you kill somebody's father or brother or take somebody's land, is that person going to be quiet? As long as he can resist or she can resist, he's going to do it. What Islam has got to do with that one? It's not a tough nut to crack. Am I clear? Second thing he says, that even if there is no issue of Palestine, no Islam, when the difference comes in ideology or resources, you see the same thing happening between Christians. IRA, the Irish, party, okay, they were fighting against what? The British government. Both of them are Christians, Anglican and Catholic. For how many years they have dislodged the British powers in Ireland? And don't you consider that terrorism? It was the worst kind of terrorism, bombing, suicide bombing, all of those kind of stuff. Islam was not involved in that. When the Russians and the Americans were fighting in the Cold War, he says there were so many, say for example, Red Army, Liberation Army, terrorism going on, and Islam was not involved. In Peru, in Colombia, how many people have been killed? Because of what? The drug war, all of those kind of stuff. Was Islam involved in that one? So he says whenever the problem is going to be coming, the control of resources, instability, insecurity, injustice, exploitation, it's human nature to revolt and to resist, to stop blaming Islam for all of these problems. And he says even in the Muslim world, when you talk about Palestine, the biggest resistance group came from Beirut for a long time. And who was in charge of that group? George Habash. George Habash. And do you know who was George Habash? He was a Christian, Orthodox Christian, who fought against Israelis perhaps more than many of the Muslims. So it's not Islam which is fighting because Palestine is Islamic. It's the Christian Palestinians, the Orthodox Christians fighting against the Jews because this land belonged to those Christians and Muslims. So the issue is moral, the issue is political, the issue is ethnic, the issue is territorial rather than religious. He gives another example. He says pan-Arabism. In 60s, 70s, from Jamal Abdel Nasser to Hafiz al-Assad, you just name it. They wanted pan-Arabism. That was your fight against what? The Arabs. And who was the founder of pan-Arabism? Who founded the Baas Party? Michael Aflaq. Michael Aflaq, Michael, that's what the English Michael, but Michael Aflaq, who is a Christian. He was the one who founded the Baas Party. Jamal Abdel Nasser loved him, respected him. Saddam Hussein had a big statue of him in Baghdad. Even in one of the palaces of Saddam Hussein, Aflaq statue would come even before Saddam Hussein. And he was a Christian who was educated in Sorbonne University in France. Came from there and started the Baas Party. That's the founder of Baas Party all over the Islamic world. So what he's saying these are the genuine grievances, genuine problems. When you divided the people into different states, this is Egypt, this is Sudan, this is Syria, this is Palestine, this is such and such. And then those people, they lost their respect and they felt humiliated. They are looking for some avenues to stop that humiliation and to get back to their roots. So whether they are Christians or they are Muslims, they are Arabs or Persians or Turk or South Asians, they are what? Making their grievances heard. And they are utilizing the slogan, which is Islam, because it brings them the bigger, what you call, acceptance among the masses. The example he gives is, he says, sun is there. The rays of sun are already there. What does the magnifying glass do? The magnifying glass brings all of those rays together and turns it into one beam. And when that one beam burns, you feel there is something happening. So Islam is the magnifying glass of all of those grievances which are already there. And those grievances are based upon our foreign policy, our hegemony, our military power, our sense of superiority. Am I clear? So that's what he says, that the problem is not there with Islam. He also analyzes, he says, look at the massacres, the murders, or the mass murders of humanity in the 19th and 20th century. Let's not talk about crusades or the colonial powers or anybody. Let's talk about the modern problems. He says, the biggest massacres in the history of humanity in the modern time after Enlightenment were committed by the secular regimes, not religious regime at all. Who was Hitler? He says, not a religious figure. Who was Mussolini? Who was Stalin? Who was Marx? And look at how many people are killed by Hitler, by Mussolini, by these fascists. The numbers are in millions. Islam was not involved. Actually, no religion was involved. You want to secularize Islam to make them Mussolinis and Hitlers? Which one is better, to have some moral ideology which restrict the people, or to make them secularize? And what did Mao Zedong do? That revolution, how many people it killed in China? Was he a Muslim? Was he a religious figure? Same thing Saddam Hussein among the Muslims. As secular you make, even among the Muslims, you find them horrible figures. And then he asked the question, he says, we want to give everybody Christian values, huh? But World War I and World War II were not fight between Muslims and Christians. It was fought between your so-called civilized Europeans. 35 million in one, 65 million in the other. Islam was not involved. Islam was not the problem. Civil wars in Europe, civil wars in America. So that's where he says, face the reality. Face the reality. Don't just find an enemy and find the wrong enemy, because then you will make the policies which are misdirected. And as long as you do not address the major problem, the problem of occupation, the problem of colonialism, the problem of, hegemonizing the resources, controlling those choke points, our fleets, our guns, our aircrafts, our tanks, just showing the presence of the superpower everywhere, you will not be able to find the solution for these resistance movements or hatred which is coming. So whether they are Muslim or Christians or Hindus or anybody, there is going to be resentment as long as we do not come out of this kind of strategy of military might. We need to come out and have the dialogue of civilizations, not the clash of civilization. When you make the other person sit on the table and ask him, what's wrong with you? What's bothering you? And let that person share the grievance. If something is genuine, listen to it as a human being, because all of us are human beings. If something is not genuine, have a dialogue. Find some resolution to it. You cannot resolve everything by military might. And military mights do not remain forever. There were so many empires which came before us. And actually America has tasted the brutality of empire, which is the British Empire. George Washington and our founding fathers had to fight the British armies to get the freedom. And even after the freedom, there was so much fight between different factions, civil wars. Finally, we felt that perhaps might and military is not the resolution to these problems. That's where we sat, and we talked about liberal democracy, equality. Everybody has got the right. As long as you follow these parameters, you are part of the union. Europe did the same thing. Each state trying to hegemonize the other. French against Germany, Germany against England, England against... Finally, they figured out that there's no way you can hegemonize the other nations. You have to sit with them on the table, accept them as equal, listen to their grievances, and stop these kind of superiority-inferiority complex and territorial conflicts. Let everybody have their own independence and work on the areas where you can agree. If you go to Europe, wallah, some of those states are like small states, like a finger in the map of Europe. This is Denmark, this is Sweden. I mean, you just cross the road and you say, oh my God, where am I? Oh, you are in Denmark. Oh, really? Okay, now you go to the other. Oh, now you are in Sweden. Okay, you go on, the same person is driving, because nowadays, as you know, the Europeans, they do not have the visa problem. So you just carry that card, and if you've got American passport, So the guy is driving, and suddenly you look at the language is different. So you ask him, which language is this one? Oh, this is Swedish. But we were just in Denmark right now. Oh, no, we have crossed. This is the line. Now this is the Norway. I mean, can you imagine? They can live. So when people agree, they accept each other as equals. They have got European Union. Within the European Union, they have got different blocks, but they are living together. Why can't you treat everybody else like the same way? treat the Arabs and the Jews and the Muslims and the Hindus and the Chinese, everybody together, put them on the table, resolve those issues without showing them our F-16 and Bradley tanks, and once again killing all of those innocent human beings in the name of Saddam Hussein or in the name of Osama bin Laden. And especially once Saddam Hussein is killed, Osama bin Laden is gone, then what are we doing in Afghanistan? What are we doing in? So that tells you it was not Osama bin Laden, it was not Saddam Hussein, it was our oil, our policy, our hegemony, our control upon the territory. So don't blame Islam. They are there to control the resources, the oil, the territory, and somehow in the wake of controlling, they feel that Islam is the problem. So they are just dissecting the Quran, the Prophet ﷺ, and they want to tarnish the name of Islam, the name of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, the Quran, so that Muslims lose respect for that, and that gluing, which takes place between the Malaysian, Indonesians, Pakistanis, Indian, wherever they are, they consider themselves like one brotherhood, one Muslim ummah, even though they do not do much about it, but they feel, everybody talks about it. So what they want, they've got the political agenda, they want to kind of cause a crack in the minds of the people by causing doubts in their mind about the Quran, about Rasulullah sallam. But this will not happen in the Muslim civilization or in the Muslim countries, because our relationship with the Quran is based upon logical analysis. We have done this work for the last 13, 14 centuries. There were so many heretics, so many agnostics who asked so many questions about the authenticity, purity, and textual authenticity of the Quran. And they found their answers from history. We have asked this question about our ahadith. We have done 3 centuries of work, divided the ahadith into authentic, non-authentic, fabricated. So whenever somebody comes and talks about the hadith, you have got plenty of work done by the scholars, so you can go back and you say, no, this person is just trying to cause some kind of suspicion which is not there. Our concepts, because they come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself, and we have studied the concept of God, the concept of scripture, the concept of morality. Those concepts are determined by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and protected by him. If they were promulgated by human beings, as we have seen in the case of some of the other traditions, we might have got a lot of reason to doubt them. But in the end, they prove themselves by themselves. So therefore, it's not going to be happening in the Muslim world or in the Muslim civilization, because it's not based upon human understanding, human knowledge. It is based upon the revelation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So therefore, we should try our best to do our part to clarify in the minds of our brothers and sisters in America and elsewhere that the problem is not Islam. The problem is not Quran. The problem is not Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The problem is in the minds of our hawkish neocon policymakers who consider themselves superior over all other human beings, who really feel that they have got the right to rule everybody, to exploit everybody's resources without giving them the equal rights. And no human being is going to like it, whether they are Hindus or they are Christians or they are Jews. If they are talking about dictatorships, look at the African countries, most of them are Christians, and they are still going through dictatorship, and nobody is talking about that one. Is that because of Christianity? If they are talking about disunity, look at what's happening in African countries. They are Christians, but they are disunited, even though they follow the same pattern. Because the problem is geopolitical, territorial. If it is the issue that, okay, Kashmiris are fighting against India, but don't forget that we have got BJP and the other Indian forces which are talking about what? Purifying India from everybody other than Hindus. If you are talking about Muslims not having coexistence with others, look at the Jews and the Christians who have survived for 14 centuries in the Islamic world. Islam is perhaps the most pluralistic religion in the world. No other scripture has given that much right to the people of other faith traditions as Quran has dictated in its own text. And if you are talking about some nonsensical extremist, there are some Nazis here in America. You look on the internet, they are saying this country is for white people, Jews, immigrants, Latins, everybody, all the immigrants should go out. And they are, astaghfirullah, they are calling for militias to arm themselves and get ready to have the fight against the immigrants. You've got Ku Klux Klan, you've got all of these white supremacists. Nobody brings them on TV. But they will bring a stupid Muslim who has got no following in his own country just to make the point. They will bring him on the TV. Even in this Sharia report, which was brought, and oh my goodness, millions of dollars were spent on that one. Do you know who are the people they are quoting? There are quotations from somebody, Muhammad Akram, who used to work for Holy Land Foundation. If you look at that young man, he has got no religious background, no religious degree, nothing, but because his statement suits the agenda of these right-wingers. So his statement, what was? Our jihad here is not the violent jihad. Our jihad is da'wah. This is what he says. So now they say, anybody who is engaged in Muslim preaching and da'wah is doing the steel jihad, because that's what Muhammad Akram said. Who is Muhammad Akram? He is nobody in the Muslim community. But why don't they bring the Nazi Americans or the white supremacists or the people of Ku Klux Klan who have got a history of killing the blacks and so many immigrants? Am I clear? So, with all honesty, I do not see the clash between the religions or cultures or civilization. I do see the clash between the superpower, the neocons, the hawkish, the military might guys, and the common people of the world, whether they are Muslims, Hindus, Jews, or Christians. There's going to be conflict as long as we do not know how to treat other people equal and give them the independence to think whatever way they want to think and the way they want to behave. Even when in our personal relationship we try to control the other person, our husband or wife or our children, there's always conflict. Because sometimes when we try to control other person's thinking, other person's actions, the circumstances around us, sometimes we can't do it. And that's what is the source of what? Sadness. But if a person gives the other person the right to think for themselves, independence, which is the source of our liberal democracy, that every individual is what? Enjoys the self-esteem and equality. Then when you are unable to control something, you say, I did what I could, and it's up to the other person. So therefore, that avoids the conflict. But here we are sitting in Washington. We want the people in Somalia to think the way we think. The people in Yemen even to think the way we think. In Pakistan, to think the way we think. Not only agree upon what we can agree, but we want them to even think about the same issue the way we think. And that's what is the source of resentment of the people against our policymakers. People love America, people love its civilization, people love its technology, but they do not like or respect American bombs or American missiles. So if somehow we can stop those ones, perhaps we will contribute a great deal when it comes to the world peace. So I will encourage all of us to go out with this message that no, there's no inherent clash between civilizations. We are one people coming from the same God, from one mom and one dad, Adam and Eve, and especially the Abrahamic traditions. We share a lot of commonalities. So don't make Islam the enemy, but look at some of your mistakes also and analyze them, and maybe you will be the biggest contributor to the world peace. I'll stop here now and give you the opportunity for questions, because now we have discussed two aspects. One theory is the clash of civilization, and today I somehow have kind of debunked that concept using Graham Fuller's book, that Islam is not the problem. These problems are territorial, financial, political, and geopolitics is the source of the conflicts. And if somehow you can address those ones, you will be able to bring peace in the world. And then, inshallah, next week I'll talk about the dialogue of civilizations. But any questions for what has been said so far? Yes, Akhi.
I have about 3 questions.
Mm-hmm.
First, a suggestion that maybe you could stop a little bit earlier, so we can have enough time for dialogues and questions and more time for it. So the first thing I want to ask is that a little bit about you and also for all of us, because the impression I have and some people have is that once you start speaking the truth in America, say anything against the policy of America, then it's a source of that you are looking for trouble. So for religious leaders like you, they start looking at all the speeches and looking for phrases, one word or the other, and then they put all this together and then they make a case for something or the other. So my first question is, number one, are you concerned about this? We are recording this thing and so on, and then if we are going to go out and then, passing this message around, should we be concerned at all?
Remember one thing, that this is part of American spirit as well as the Constitution, to have the right of dissension and to express your conscience as long as you are not doing anything harm to the country. I've got full right to disagree with our policymakers, with our neocons. I know that this is troublesome. I know everybody's looking, watching, they will look at each word. But to me, I have chosen to be the citizen of this country. And I have chosen to be this country as my homeland. I don't want this country to lose its respect, and I don't want it to lose it for the long term. I don't see it losing in the short term, but I see it losing the moral leadership in the long term. And I see that the future of my children may be jeopardized. We have left our countries thinking that this is the best country for us, and the way our country is being taken by these neocons is going to be bringing a lot of disrespect and distrust to America. So I am doing it. Number one, I am a conscious Muslim, and my allegiance to my religion and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like any Jew or Christian, is the primary source. And at the same time, that God wants me to say the truth and share the justice part with humanity, with my brothers and sisters, Muslims, non-Muslims. Number two, the same Sharia tells me to love the land where you eat from. This is the land where I earn, where I eat from, where I live, I enjoy prosperity, security. It's my haq, it's my right and duty to make sure that this country is not damaged. This country is not attacked. This country does not go down the drainage. So with all honesty, what I do is to fulfill my religious as well as my American responsibility to say what is the truth, so that our policymakers or our population at large understands that we are going after the wrong enemy. We have not identified the enemy yet, and somehow the true concerns and the grievances are going to come and haunt us. So we want them to face the real enemy, which is our sense of superiority, our military power and show, and basically going all around and throwing bombs upon them. I want them to stop it so that those people are in peace and we are in peace. As I've said it in my khutbahs, that we have lost more troops by invading Iraq and invading Afghanistan than perhaps, say for example, the people whom we lost in 9/11. Which was horrible, but now what is happening is more horrible. I really feel, as long as Americans are seeing the truth with sincerity, and they are concerned about the well-being and the security of our country, America, I think they have got the right to differ with the policymakers. And this is what the Constitution gives us. This is what Thomas Jefferson said it. So we want to make sure that everybody understands that this is within the constitutional right of a Muslim or for any American citizen.
The second question is, I don't believe that our leaders in America, that they are completely stupid, that they don't really see these things. They just choose to ignore it and just choose to go against the wrong enemy. So there's this theory that these people are saying that there's a powerful group of people that walk behind the shadows, that dictate the policy of the world. Not only in America and Europe, and everything is linked together, and because you can't even become president unless they really, really sanction it. All these Democrat Republicans is just something for everybody to just see. I mean, is there some truth to this?
I strongly believe that many of our policymakers, they know the real problems, but they don't want to address it because of their arrogance and because of their political interest and agendas. And I also see that there are some lobbyists, some strong groups who are running the show behind the curtain, and most of them are financial institutions, bankers. Those people, to them, everything is money. But there are some policymakers who are very, very moralistic also. They think about it. Like Graham Fuller. I mean, he was one of the high leaders in CIA. But if you look at his analysis, it's a very authentic analysis. Very, very genuine concern. There are so many people in CIA, in FBI. There's one thing good in America, that you've got all types of people. If FBI is, getting the manuals and training the counter-terrorists with the thinking that Islam is the problem, from within FBI there are some people who leak those documents because they don't believe that this is the genuine concern, or the FBI is not finding the proper enemy. So you have got all type of people, good people, bad people among the policymakers, which is a good sign that not everybody is brainwashed. So we really feel that there are some people who are concerned just like us, among the policymakers, among the FBI, CIA, who feel that perhaps we are going against the wrong enemy, against the Muslims at large. We need to find what are the grievances, resolve them, and find those culprits who are really against humanity and against civilization. So I hope that after all of these money and spending and all of these sacrifices, our policymakers will come and sit down sometime and say, we need to find the real enemy instead of this phony enemy. Okay? Jazakumullah khair. Subhanallah wa bihamdi. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.